They're still coming in. Good morning. I'm Bill Gutowski. I'm the moderator for this session, but the real stars are our panelists who will be coming along later. I want to thank you for joining our workshop this morning on agriculture as a climate solution. I think Daniel Wildcat's inspiring words this morning really set the tone for us in our discussions today. The theme for this workshop fits the goals of the science and research portion of this summit, which are briefly to synthesize what is already known about climate impacts and solutions in the Midwest, to develop a climate research agenda that's focused on the Midwest and particular strategies that we can look towards, and to build a network that tries to advance that climate research agenda across the Midwest. In other words, we're seeking calls to action. I want to thank our student facilitators, Izzy Surloff, Marie Kim, and Isaac Olson, who are providing really important help to us in work today. Before we get into the panelists, I'd like to give some, who I'll introduce in a minute or two. I first want to give some Zoom guidance. Dave, if you could bring up that Zoom slide, that would be really helpful. Those of you may be familiar with Zoom, and that's great, but if you aren't, in your Zoom window, you'll see a number of different buttons. Starting off on the left side, if you want to participate in discussion during the breakout, there's a microphone that you can click on to unmute yourself. If you are participating in the discussion, please turn on the video so we can see who's talking. If you decide that you just want to be sitting and listening in, that's fine. You don't need to turn on your video. You're certainly welcome to just watch and listen to the conversation. If you want to engage in any of the discussion, there's two options. One is the chat window, which I would certainly encourage you to use to pose questions or make comments. You can make comments to each other privately, or you can to the group as a whole. We will be monitoring the chat window to just to see if there are important questions, especially that we want to make sure get addressed. You can also click on the participants button that brings up a list of participants. And within that participants window that would open up on the right side, you can raise your hand if you want to say something and feel like you're not getting a chance to talk, and we will try to make sure that we keep an eye on that as well. There's also a little button where you can give nonverbal feedback, just reactions, as you see along the lower part of the main window there. So there are various options you have to engage with us, and we certainly encourage you to participate, especially in the breakout sessions. I also want to point out that after the panel presentations, you will be assigned randomly to one of the breakout rooms. It may not be the particular panelist that is your favorite to join, but all topics that are covered by the panelists are open for discussion. And we certainly want to make sure that you do engage on any of the topics that interest you. All topics are open for discussion. And again, the focus on this is to work towards calls to action. And so now for our panelists, I personally am really thrilled and excited to hear all of these three panelists we have today. It's a great group of people. They bring a wealth of knowledge to the table and a lot of experience about how we might make Midwest agriculture work as a climate solution. Our first panelist is Marshall Johnson. Marshall is a vice president of the National Audubon Society. Marshall has performed pioneering work in the Dakotas, bringing farmers, ranchers, retailers, and consumers together with grasslands, herds, and birds to win in a win-win alignment. The groundbreaking market-based conservation ranching program now enrolls more than 2 million acres across 60 ranches, an astounding achievement. Marshall, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bill. I'm gonna bring up my PowerPoint really quickly here. Let's see. Really great to be with all of you this morning, talking about a topic that I could go on personally talking about forever, but I'm gonna try to be mindful of my time. Can everyone see my slide?
Yes.
I'll wait for it to enlarge here. Yeah. Audubon, we come to this grasslands and climate work, obviously through the lens through which we view our work. And that's through grassland birds and through birds. Birds are the prism through which we view our work. Birds take us to the places and the people that we work with. And for me, my passion lies in grassland conservation. It's a great field to be in because of the enormous opportunity and challenges we have in the grassland ecosystem. If, I won't bore you with the negative or bad stuff, but the fact is, grasslands, which are North America's most ubiquitous landscape, native biome, native ecosystem, are declining at a astounding rate over the last 100 years. And with grasslands go grassland birds. And we look at this study or the recent 3 billion birds lost study since 1970 out of Cornell Lab of Ornithology. You see grassland birds are in a lot of trouble. And shorebirds also mainly nest in grasslands and alkali wetlands as well. So grasslands are, and then you see that visually. We, over the last 100 years, have lost so much of this native ecosystem, probably about half as a
wow.
Number, probably percent. But when you get into kind of the Midwest there and you look at the eastern tallgrass prairie and the central tallgrass prairies and the blackland prairies in the southeast, we've actually lost 90 or more % of those biomes and those ecosystems. And so there's a big connection here. You know, and why are we talking about when we're talking about birds? Birds are a great indicator of overall ecosystem health. Mainly birds are being born on agricultural lands. More than 95% of native wildlife are being born and they live on pasture land and grassland and hayland, or in some way within an agricultural system. We're really in grassland conservation been moving away from kind of the preservation concept and more into building an approach that brings in our agricultural stewards, brings in farmers and ranchers into kind of a holistic approach for grassland conservation, because grasslands, the soils upon which they exist, are incredible storage units for carbon. And through changes in management, those grasslands can store an abundant more carbon under their soils. I live here in Fargo, North Dakota, and in North Dakota, grasslands, an acre of grasslands can store between 30 and 50 metric tons of carbon per acre. So that's an incredible amount of carbon that's stored right under our grasslands. Grassland, we still have roughly 300 million acres of grasslands still remaining. And how we work with farmers and ranchers over the next 25 to 30 years will say a lot about what we can accomplish in terms of having grasslands not only serve as a bulwark and creating more resiliency within our environment against the ravages of climate change, but also you have all of those other ecosystem benefits such as wildlife, bird habitat, cleaner water. Grasslands naturally filtrate pollutants out of streams, rivers, tributaries across the country. So grasslands and the preservation of grasslands are really kind of at the forefront of a cohesive climate strategy. And you can just see, you know, I could really dive into this, but the redder areas there show soils that can have the potential for the greatest amount of carbon storage. But even if as you look at the yellow and the green areas, all those areas where you find grasslands, you have an opportunity to keep the carbon in the soil. That's where we want it, and gradually increase the amount of carbon in the soil. Just as a snapshot of how the correlation between grassland loss and grassland loss and carbon emissions. Between 19, I believe, 85 and, between 2008 and 2015, the amount of grasslands that were lost contributed to emissions that are the size of 670 million cars. So as we lose grasslands, we certainly lose or emit a lot of carbon into the atmosphere. And there are, one of the ways that we go about or want to go about changing that dynamic is moving away from continuous grazing, which is unsustainable for the rancher, unsustainable for the ecosystem, and moving more towards a regenerative or adaptive multi-paddock system where we're able to maximize the use of nutrients and manure in building and rebuilding soils. And when we do this on ranch lands, it has a myriad of benefits, but the primary benefit here is utilizing grasslands to create a more resilient environment for North America and the globe, really. And this is, again, a part of we at Audubon, we go at this from a multi-dimensional strategy, which includes grassland conservation, grassland easements, a market-based strategy. When you see meat products with that seal right there, they're raised, that's meat that comes from ranches that are certified by Audubon as being bird-friendly and regenerative. Which is key to increasing the amount of carbon under our feet. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleagues here. I really appreciate you listening.
Thank you, Marshall. Hopefully we'll have a chance for people to ask some questions to the panel as a whole at the end. Very interesting work, and obviously all of our panelists could talk on for a great length. But in the interest of moving along, our second panelist is Jean Eels. Jean is president of eResources. Through that, she has developed and implemented outreach for women who own farmland to empower them with conservation information. Her research has fostered conservation programs for women across the Midwest and beyond, sparking a movement of spin-off programs across the entire United States. Jean, please. Jean, are you muted? We can't hear you.
Oh, I did the unforgivable thing. So when conservationists talk about agriculture, we tend to talk about it in terms of problems with soil and water, and that those are things that farmers control. And many in the public really only know about those farmers as either saints or perhaps uncaring. And we assume that farmers are the ones that are in control of all of the ag decisions. But I would challenge us as conservationists and researchers to think about there is another group of people who really have a lot to say about how the land can be used for conservation purposes. And women own or co-own half the land. It depends on what state you're in. We could quibble about the details, but it's an important group, and landowners own the land and can influence those decisions. And women are more likely to rent their land to tenants. And I think that's another important point to remember, is that there's a point of influence because of that financial relationship that we could take advantage of. And there we go. Women will make change. We find through the evaluation of Women, Food and Agriculture Network's Women Caring for the Land program for the last 11 years, when women come to a one-day meeting, we find that 70% of them will take action to change conservation for the better on their own land, we need to talk to them. We can double the amount of acres that are in conservation now by reaching women. What we need to think about is the fact that landowners don't know a lot of things. They don't know that farmers don't necessarily know all soil health principles. Women often will tell me, oh, my tenant will tell me anything I needs to know. You know, he's on top of all those things. And we find that they don't all necessarily know those things. And I challenge you as an action item to learn everything you can about the slate test, and everybody needs to do this. You need to do it for yoga clubs, book clubs. I don't care what other kind of group you're in. Everybody needs to start talking about and doing the slate test. It's effective for farmers who don't know that this is visible evidence of degradation of the soil. And it's certainly news to landowners who do not understand that this is a symptom of too much tillage, which is the problem we're seeing with climate change. And landowners don't know a lot of things. They don't know that what's common is not normal. So they could drive by, see a bunch of ruts in the soil last fall, and you'd see it field after field after field. So it was common. That's not normal. We need to learn how to recognize that that's a problem, that the soil is something is going wrong with the soil. They need to realize there's a problem on their land, and they need to know that the problems are theirs and they can solve them. They can work with it. They can help their tenant solve those problems, but they have to start taking action. They need to know these things, and we need to tell them. So what's different for women landowners? This is a big deal. We use the slate test for them as well. It's a total eye opener. You need to learn how to do this. And there is a huge difference in how we have organized our work in agriculture and conservation is according to a system that's very vertical that men are very comfortable with. There's nothing wrong with it, but it has a hierarchical, linear, step-by-step nature. And women tend to organize their social lives and conversations in relational ways that are much more horizontal. It's simply a different approach. Not one is better than the other. They're just different. And we've always been talking about agriculture and conservation in gender-specific ways that are comfortable for men. Let's bring women into the conversation because we can double those acres. And if you think about it, the acres that we have in conservation now are due to early adopter, innovator, male farmers who have generally made that switch. Let's double that instantly by reaching those early adopter women. Will double the acres. That's low-hanging fruit. It starts to get more conservation acres out there. I've seen it happen over and over, but it needs all of us. And take action now. Don't wait. And show us. Show us women who are making changes. And it makes a difference. Show us what the problems are. Show us how to spot the problems, how to talk about them, and we show them pathways for women, how they can reach, how they can work with their tenants. It makes a big difference. So take your current projects and adapt them to make them women welcome. So look at how you can think about your research, and I can guarantee if you ask for help, if you are not normally thinking about things in a relational peer-to-peer way, ask for help. You will enrich any research project that you undertake if you look for those two different ways of approaching it. Neither one is right or not one is wrong, but you will enrich what you're doing. And remember, in agriculture, change is always a whole year away. There are seed contracts that come in December. There's herbicide carryover that may prevent you from adopting cover crops. There are lease renewal dates that fall on a year. This is a commitment for a year, so we can't enact change unless we start today. So let's fix it now. Let's get our heads around that paradigm shift that Daniel Wildcat was talking about, and let's start looking at that relational way of working. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Another great perspective, and we're going to have our third great perspective now coming up. Our third panelist is Mark Rasmussen. Mark is director of the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture at Iowa State University. He has a broad range of expertise, including in farming himself. He applies his expertise to determine how agriculture can be modified to limit the effects of climate change, in part through carbon sequestration. Mark, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Bill. And thanks for everybody tuning in today. I want to give you a quick view of Iowa-centric agriculture. We've heard some about other areas of the country. So what I show here is a composite of what Iowa is in terms of its agriculture. We have a lot of millions of acres. It's one of the most altered states in the union in terms of what we have done to the landscape. We grow a lot of corn and soybeans to feed hogs and chickens, #1 egg producer, and a lot of that corn also goes into ethanol. And then, of course, we're very reliant on export markets for all of that productivity, especially to the Asian countries in terms of pork and soybeans and even now corn. Next slide. A little bit about farmers and climate change. Many surveys have shown that there's widespread skepticism amongst farmers, especially with regards to the human impacts of climate change. But also with that, there's widespread realization of weather challenges that they've been facing. Wet planting seasons, wet harvest seasons, and then we had the derecho this year with a windstorm that flattened a lot of cornfields in central Iowa. Farmers as a whole are generally opposed to regulation and oversight, even though they're one of the more lightly regulated industries in the country. Another thing politically to point out is that farmers are a minority segment of the population, but they retain strong political influence, especially with Congress. And so in many cases, if we want to reform agriculture, we got to start with Congress because they continually backstop the current status quo. Now, with regards to the development of carbon markets, we tried this a decade or so ago and it didn't take, but there are companies starting it up again where people can, or companies can put in funds and they will be the middle broker to pay those monies to farmers to do certain practices on their land. And being a skeptic, I ask if this is something different or just another one-way subsidy, because there's a lot of interest. They may not believe in climate, but hey, if you're going to pay me to do something, I'll be interested. That's kind of the attitude with farmers right now. The other thing about it is trust but verify. For a lot of these practices to work, they need to be put in and they need to be there for many years in order to accumulate the carbon and so forth. But if somebody comes along and changes management and plows that ground back up, well, poof, all of that carbon goes right back up into the atmosphere. So there has to be accreditation of the practices to make sure that they are practices that do store carbon, but also that they are put in place and remain there. And I would finally say on this slide that we have a history of disappointment in farm programs where good intentions, but oftentimes a lot of public money hasn't necessarily been well utilized in these programs. Next slide. This is just a quick slide to show you NOAA has a gas sampling site in eastern Iowa, West Branch, Iowa. And you see those sharp downward spikes. That's the decline of the carbon dioxide, atmospheric carbon dioxide during the summer months. It declines very significantly when the crops are growing, when everything is growing. But then of course that doesn't hold. It returns in the winter months, in the fall, back up to the global averages. And you can see the trend lines up there. Next slide. One thing I want to emphasize is that on our greenhouse gas life cycle analyses and proponents for a plant-based system, they're neglecting soil and water components in those calculations. The first two slides up there, I want to show you what happens to Iowa land. This was with the ethanol boom, when people think that they can till highly erodible, steep land in various parts of Iowa. And you get a lot of soil erosion, you get a lot of water runoff, and it's very poor and damaging to the soils too. And of course, we have large machinery now because they're trying to plant fast in narrow planting windows. But of course, they don't use contour farming. They'll farm on the square, up and down hills, and so forth. Irrigation is also an issue with intensive plant production, although not so much in Iowa. That is in Western states. So we really need a more integrated system of livestock and cropping systems from the standpoint of soil and water quality. Next slide. So I would just summarize in saying, in changes that we need in our Midwestern agriculture, we need less tillage, because tillage oxygenates the soil and oxidizes carbon out of the soil. We need fewer acres of annual crops. Corn and soybeans are annuals. We need more long-term crop rotations, which will help with soil health and water quality. We need more perennials and crop diversity. And finally, we need more forage crops and livestock grazing systems that can maintain the health of that soil and keep our water cleaner. So with that, I'll stop, Bill.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. A lot of interesting concepts there for us to be thinking about. We're going to be going into our breakout rooms. I wanted to give people, the panel as a whole, a chance to respond to at least one question. There have been a lot of great questions that have come up in the chat window. And I see that Jean has tried to respond to some of them. One question that I will bring up that came from the chat window that I think is overarching and that all of you could address briefly is this one that has to do with the pressures farmers face and to put maximum acreage into production. And Mark in his slide actually touched upon that a bit as well at the end. But I'd like all three of you, maybe starting with Marshall, then going to Jean and then to Mark, to just say a very few words about how to deal with that pressure, because I understand that is clearly a pressure. And I've seen myself instances of where farmers have had land put into production that really probably was actually unprofitable for them, but they feel the pressure to do it anyway. So Marshall, if you're there, maybe you could address that question first, and then we'll jump to Jean and then to Mark. And you're muted. No, now, try now.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
It's a great question, and it's one of the things we really work on through our programming. We have 1.9 million members. There are a lot of members on kind of the coast, big population centers. One of the really important aspects of our work is really getting everyday people to understand, landowners make decisions based on a number of factors. And one of those factors that I think we have a big opportunity to influence with our ag partners and our conservation partners, and that's policy. There are so many policies that almost incentivize and one might say force landowners to make an adverse decision in what they grow, how they grow it. And I think that's where we really need to see improvements in the Farm Bill so that landowners are incentivized to do practices and grow things, whether it's beef or barley, and using, I've heard contour planting mentioned today. That's where we can have a big impact because oftentimes, as has been mentioned, the land that's being broke up now requires a lot of inputs and is only profitable in a really robust commodities market. And even then, it's really hard to make a profit, and policies are where we really need to have some more focus.
Jean.
This is going to be maybe a little bit different than what you expect, but if we let women landowners into this equation, they can make a huge difference. I've talked to women who will take less rent if their farmer will introduce conservation. They will support their farmers. Not all of them, but let's let the ones who are willing to do it. I've talked to women, and I myself have bought farm equipment that will allow my renter to use conservation practices that he wouldn't otherwise do. Bring the landowners in and show them what they can do and how they can do it. And at least let's scoop up double the acres right off the bat. It may be a heavy lift to get the rest of the way, but let's not let those landowners buy by not knowing what to do. I think if we let them know what to do, we will find people who will help us. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Jean. Mark.
I would go back to governmental policy and acknowledge that farmers are often caught in a squeeze between input suppliers and markets that they can sell their production to. And I would say this goes back to government because oftentimes agribusiness is tremendously concentrated over the last few decades. The Supreme Court decisions and Congress decisions with regards to antitrust have just let this run wild. And so farmers are caught in this squeeze, and every, machinery, seed genetics, chemicals, you name it, every industry is really consolidated now, and they pretty much decide the market and how much share that the farmer is going to get out of these things. And so if there are any students who are thinking about law school, and I've said this before, I would really encourage them to study antitrust, because at some point in time, we're going to have another generation of trust busters in this country.
Thank you, Mark. I think a common theme that we've seen in these presentations that we should keep in mind is that farmers are running a business, and it's easy enough for us to talk about what they should be doing or not be doing. But at the end of the day, if they're not making a profit, then they're going to go out of business, and perhaps we'll get even greater consolidation in the hands of people who are less inclined to practice appropriate sustainable practices. Okay, we're going to go into our breakout rooms now. Again, please remember that you're being assigned randomly. You may not be matched up with your favorite panelist, but all topics are open for discussion. And please remember that we are looking especially for ways and opportunities to foster action. So we'll go there, and then we'll pull everybody back for a few final minutes at the end. But I hope people will feel free to participate as much as possible. And please accept the invitation that pops up on your screen for the breakout room that you're being asked to join. Okay, welcome back, everybody. What I'd like to do is ask our student facilitators to perhaps give us a brief recap of what they heard in their session. I know they had a sort of a dual task to some extent, trying to coordinate things. And there's a lot going on in the chat window, which probably was you couldn't always pay attention to everything. Marie, I'm going to start off with you because I kind of jumped in and took over at least part of your role. No offense to you, but hopefully I'd say if you could quickly just make a few comments about what you saw going on in your session so everybody can hear what was going on in other discussions.
Yeah, so we talked about individuals and policies influencing the climate. So we mentioned individual efforts and how that is somewhat impactful, but there are also policy and government changes that would really push to a bigger solution. We also mentioned food insecurities and how low-income families wouldn't be able to have access to those that would make change. We talked about how farmers should be recognized as business, no matter what their connections are to their land and whatnot. And yeah, we had multiple discussions going on, but I think that's the bigger concept.
Great. Thank you, Marie. Izzy, do you want to say something about a little bit about what was discussed in your breakout?
Yes, thank you. So we were talking about individuals and organizations, individuals in respect of what is going on in our communities and how can we be more knowledgeable about who's owning land around us, and how can we get involved in the pursuit to kind of take down the barriers of entry to knowledge. And then we also spoke about existing organizations and which ones are there that are currently doing the things that Jean was talking about. And yeah, we were also talking about priorities and how conservation comes at a cost sometimes. And yeah, that's basically it.
All right, thank you, Izzy. Then finally, Isaac, brief summary.
We talked a lot about the economics of sustainable agriculture and kind of what there is behind subsidies and incentives for farmers. Something that Mark mentioned is that conservation is always one of the first things to get whacked when considering government cuts to spending. And said we need more incentives to push farmers towards sustainable and conservational practices. And this is at an economic level that Fred mentioned, and also at an international level of changing regulations so that it can be more interactive between countries like nations within Europe and China and America.
Good. Yeah, I think what I find interesting in this, and not surprising, is that there was, in some sense, 3 different discussion threads, but nonetheless intersecting discussion threads. Clearly, it exemplifies the complexity of the issue we're dealing with. But also at the same time, I had a sense that there were some action points that people were bringing up that I think are going to be very useful as we go forward, especially when we start thinking towards the full-fledged summit next spring. I also find that, and it was alluded to certainly in our breakout room, and also maybe a little bit in the general panel discussion, was, not surprisingly, there are some deep divisions within our society right now, and those can get in the way of any kind of coherent action. And maybe in the last couple of minutes or so we have left, if anybody has some thoughts on how that might be approached, I think that would be useful for us. I know our 3 panelists have all dealt with the fact that they're working with communities that have a variety of different ideas, perspectives, values that motivate them. And there is a need to bridge those divisions. And I think that our 3 speakers, our 3 panelists in different ways have done some of that. So I certainly would invite our panelists and anybody else who wants to speak up in the last few minutes here to give some of their perspective on that. Mark, Marshall, Jean, any one of you want to talk?
Well, I can say something for starters. This may sound harsh, and I can't remember now. I'm going to have to look it up. But there was a scientist many years ago who was quoted as saying, oftentimes those in a field, when there's a great change in scientific understanding, they do not come along. You simply have to wait for them to die off before the new paradigm in science occurs. And sometimes I wonder if that's the case with climate. And of course, climate is going to keep pushing us. There may be those that are stubborn about this, but as more and more evidence comes on board with different things around the globe, the rational ones are going to, yeah, okay, I have to admit that's true.
And I certainly have heard of intergenerational divides along those lines in all sorts of different groups. Jean, do you have anything to say in your work? Oh, and then Timothy.
We've had a lot of success talking to women about the problems that climate change will cause to agriculture. And that gives them a foot in, it gives them a portal, it gives them a way to start making that change. Because it speaks to you know, even if they can't say it out loud, it speaks to a very unsettled feeling inside. And it's the same feeling that they have when they think about chemicals. I hear them say, oh God, you know, I know they have to use them, but I really wish they wouldn't, because there's a part of them that's resonating to health, large land community health. And I think if we don't lose sight of that there's a power there that we can tap into, I think that's an important thing that we can do. It's the most hopeful place I've found to work because it's very, very productive.
From a political standpoint, it just doesn't seem likely that climate change should be partisan. So I think we have to recognize that Republicans, for example, are much more likely to come aboard if you can use market incentives. You can sell sequestration, you can do all kinds of things. Democrats may be a little more forgiving of regulations, but once we get over this divisiveness of this extended campaign, that maybe we can get back to agreeing it's a serious problem and that there are multiple ways in which we can address it. And we need to bring both parties aboard because we are in a very dysfunctional time politically right now.
Yeah.
My question for you, Fred, is how can we bring those people in rural areas aboard with that? Because like you said, it's very divisive right now. When you look at the counties, especially in Iowa, in rural areas and all over the country, it's voting one way, and then you go to the cities and it's voting another way, both on the presidential level, Congress, and everything. So what will it take to end that divisiveness on our level rather than waiting for government to do it?
140 mile direct straight winds that knock down a big chunk of the corn crop should catch your attention in Iowa fairly quickly. And then you've had flooding, serious flooding, unprecedented flooding, and flooding and a straight wind doesn't care whether you're Democratic or Republican, rural or urban. Everybody gets slammed. So I think you play on the inclusiveness of these effects of climate change and realize that we've got to get busy with some collaboration and understanding that there's more than one way to work on it, but we need to work on it.
Timothy, I think you've been patiently waiting to say something, and then after Timothy, Marshall.
I may be disabled by a high degree of Pollyannishness, but our parents and grandparents, et cetera, often told us that, you know, the two subjects that you should avoid in public are politics and religion. And there really was some wisdom to that, I think, because there are all kinds of other subjects that within which we have common ground with people who we don't agree with, and politics. And also, it seems to me the politics isn't everything, though we have come to feel that way. So, you know, maybe that's a way to bridge differences and to move forward. But like I said, I may be naive to a fault. But
Marcia, you've been out in the field in this area, so yeah, please, your thoughts.
Yeah, it's definitely changed considerably over the 15 years I've been working with farmers and ranchers in my career. I think there's a newfound, like a freshly tapped oil well. Divisiveness has been found to be politically advantageous. Political campaigns have always been tough, but there is this new fertile grounds for divisiveness being your platform. And I worry about, I agree with Fred as to what would change, what would create that epiphany out in more rural parts of the country. My worry about that is when we see those type of environmental responses on a regular basis, it'll be far too late. It'll be far too late for those farmers. It'll be far too late for those ecosystems that will have kind of fallen off of a functionality cliff. And so that is my concern. And again, I don't want to be too Pollyanna about this, but we have to find a way to diminish the usefulness of division as a political tool. And I think that until you get over that, I think particularly division aimed at rural America. I think, again, the thing we don't often address is the economic anxiety that underpins what's happening in these communities. Farmers, ranchers, working class people, the economic anxiety is at the heart of why they do respond to some of these messages. And I think we really need to consider that. And I think, to your point, Fred, market incentives, market-based strategies, I think can help maybe sidestep some of the politics involved here.
Yeah, I'm also thinking of Daniel Wildcat's words earlier today about simply stepping outside and paying attention to the weather and climate that's going on around you. And I'm saying that because I know that over the years I've experienced that farmers certainly notice that climate is changing. They may not always want to acknowledge that humans are behind it, but they certainly are very sensitive to those types of changes. And that might in itself be an opportunity for talking about things that they may do. Although ultimately, yes, I agree that market incentives almost certainly have to play a role in all of this because, again, they're running a business. Mark.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize too that about the anxiety concept. You know, I think in Iowa, the last census, there was something 77 counties out of 99 are losing population. We'll see what the next census shows, but that really feeds into a lot of the anxiety out there and the economic stress too, that things are changing and, you know, they see these communities being boarded up and you know, it's deteriorating. And that does cause people stress.
Yes, and it's oftentimes ignored in many ways because it's out of sight.
That's right. Absolutely.
We're coming to the end here, but I wanted to see if anybody had any further comments. I don't want to just shut people off arbitrarily. Are there any last comments that anybody wants to make?
Yes, I would like to chime in about the person who said he was a Pollyanna. I really think there are some signs for optimism right now. It is like a moment of change, and there is a bipartisan policy institute that has been looking at ways to use the market mechanisms to, you know, pay farmers to do conservation practices. And there's a bill in Congress right now that has really good bipartisan support. It's called the Growing Climate Solutions Act. That's sponsored by Indiana Senator Mike Braun, who is very much a rural guy. And so I think there are some things that would could really change the landscape in a short period of time if they get political traction. That bill seems to be moving. So, and it would compensate farmers for carbon sequestered in soils, in crops, and in woodlands.
Thanks, Ray. And that might be a good example of how people can work across the aisle, as it were, in ways that are productive. There's been a lot of great discussion in the chat too. I'm glad we were able to save that. Clearly a lot more that could be said on all of this. Any further last words that somebody might have? Okay, well, we are drifting past our scheduled ending time. Thanks, everybody. I want to give thanks to our students, Izzy and Kim and Isaac, for their great help today. And also want to give thanks to our panelists, Mark, Jean, and Marshall, for contributing their time. And yes, I agree with Ray. I'm clapping my hands too, if only mentally. I think this has been very useful. I wish we could go on all day. And even if we have to go on beyond all day, of course, in this whole area. But thanks everybody for your participation. I really appreciate it. Please keep your eyes open for further activities coming up with the Midwest Climate Summit, and especially the big activity that's being planned for the spring that builds off of all of this. Thanks again. Bye-bye. Stay safe. Watch out for your neighbors and have a good weekend.
Yeah. Thank you.